Well, the Reykjavik summit is over, and President Reagan has now left Reykjavik. He's gone to the U.S. Naval Air Station at Reykjavík to say goodbye to the American forces here, and then he's going to go back to Washington. The Reykjavik summit is over, and it has not ended well. The Secretary of State is still briefing downtown to American reporters, but we can give you some of the headlines. Secretary of State Schultz said to us just a short while ago, we had very high hopes when we came here, and we came very close to realizing them, but we are very disappointed. One of the things he said was that they had come very close to reaching, and he repeated it numerous times, important potential agreements on a number of areas, including an agreement to reduce the number of strategic weapons which the United States and the Soviet Union have by half, which in the U.S. case, for example, would be 10,000 down to 5,000, equivalent cuts for the Soviets. But none of that has been possible because Mr. Gorbachev and Mr. Reagan were unable to reach any satisfactory agreement on the Strategic Defense Initiative, the President's plan for a missile defense program in space, which is sometimes known as Star Wars. Time and again, the Secretary of State in briefing reporters said substantial and important agreements were near. It was clear, however, he said, particularly late today, what enormous importance the Soviets, Mr. Gorbachev particularly, attached to the Strategic Defense Initiative. Secretary of State then went on to say that what Mr. Gorbachev was trying to do was to change the anti-ballistic missile treaty so that the United States would be prevented from doing research on SDI or Star Wars and on any testing. And it was on that basis, the Secretary of State said, that President Reagan, according to the Secretary, reluctantly said no. And so, for the moment, there does not appear to be any concrete agreement that we can put our finger on or a piece of paper can be attached to, which has been reached by Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev this afternoon or this evening here in Iceland. And there is no date for another summit between Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev. We thought there might be one, that Mr. Gorbachev was going to come to the United States at the end of this year or at the beginning of next year. No date. It was only discussed in the early meetings. Let's go back for a moment to those moments when the President and Mr. Gorbachev emerged from Hovde House after this long debating session this afternoon, part of which the two sides spent separately, but part of which they spent together. When they came out, you perhaps saw it earlier, the two came down the stairs together. We can't see it here, so we're guessing at it, and looked very somber. Quite uncharacteristically, President Reagan did not respond in any way to reporters' shouted questions. They stood outside the President's limousine for a few minutes. They exchanged some words. President Reagan got into the car. We have heard nothing from him. He has gone out to Reykjavík Naval Air Station, and he is going to make his way back to Washington. The Secretary of State continues to brief, but here is a brief portion from him which at least expresses the sentiments of him and, we assume, the President.
In the end, with great reluctance, the President, having worked so hard, creatively and constructively, for these potentially tremendous achievements, simply had to refuse to compromise the security of the U.S., of our allies, and freedom by abandoning the shield that has held in front of freedom.
It would be a terrible mistake for us or anybody else at the moment to try to guess exactly what all this means. But certainly in the final moments and certainly the final minutes of this meeting between Mr. Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev, the mood has changed from one of potential progress and considerable enthusiasm to a somber one as the President leaves for Washington tonight. The Secretary of State said that other issues saw progress, but at the moment it appears to be putting something of a good face on it. Al Michael?
All right, thank you, Peter.